Hi, everyone. Welcome to the February QualiWare User Group meeting. My name is Cecile Hurley with CloseReach, and I'm pleased to be your host for today. The agenda for today, we've got some CloseReach news to get started with. Then I'm going to pass things over to Gail Petersen and Jacob Lund. Gail for a book preview, Gail's new book, Embrace Industry 4.0. And Jacob is a contributing author, and they will both be giving us a talk about that. And then we have JayR from ESDC. JayR will be talking about some QualiWare governance workflows, features. Then we have the open forum for everyone. Before I get started with handing things over to Gail and Jacob, I'll just go through some CloseReach news real quick. Just to let you know, had a discussion recently with our friends at QualiWare in Denmark, and there is a version 10.10 being planned. Version 10.9 just came out. There's been a 10.9.1, and they are planning on a 10.10 release. Timing of that is still to be determined, but I did want to let everyone know about that. We have some upcoming training happening in the spring. We have our web publishing course in March 11th and 12th. We have a new course, our web modeler course called QualiWare Basic Web, and that will be running April 10th and 11th. And we are also running a QualiWare Advanced course in May, on May 1st and 2nd. The agenda for March will be a more technically focused agenda, and we will having some topics on Archimate and some more information about Quali AI. That's what we've got planned for March. Any questions about anything I've just discussed before I move things on to Jacob and Gail? Okay. So I'm pleased to introduce Gail Petersen and Jacob Lund. Gail has written a book recently called Embrace Industry 4.0, Architect Your Way Out of the Jungle. Jacob is a contributing author and is here to present with her today. If you have questions for Gail or Jacob as they go through their presentation, please feel free to put it into the chat. I'll keep an eye on that and interrupt at the appropriate spot. Or if you want, we'll pause for questions, and you're more than welcome to take yourself off mute and ask your question that way. So Gail and Jacob, I will hand things over to you and stop sharing so that you can start.
Thank you. Jacob, you're not showing your camera. There you go.
He's still in his pajamas?
Yeah. Warm here.
He's in his working clothes. So my name is Gail Petersen, as Cecilia said. I'm here with Jacob Lund, who is a contributing author to Embrace Industry 4.0. And we're here today to take you through some of the highlights and the thinking behind the book. And it's we've had a lot of fun putting this presentation together, and I hope you will have a lot of fun listening to it and learn some things. Next. Jacob, do you want to say anything to say there?
No, I'll pick it up.
Okay, cool. So what's happening today? Digitalization, digitization, digital twin, and digital transformation. And technology is evolving at a lightning speed, and it is going to continue to keep accelerating. These levers of change are in motion. Next. So the evolution of management system, we're going to take a look at the I externally, IX being industrial transformation. It's just a refinement of digital transformation, and then maturity of management systems. So Industry 3.0, let's take a step back. We had inertia. We've always done it this way, so why should we change? We had Lean and Six Sigma that are really flexible, mixed sources, and really today, quality management is crucial. And unforeseen setbacks can tarnish even the most reputable brands. And so sometimes that necessitates reactive measures that threaten operational strengths and integrity. Unfortunately, most management systems stalled with Industry 3.0. Why? Well, they were heavily emphasizing policies, procedures, and people, just too fixed and too rigid. The manufacturing landscape is evolving rapidly, and actually the business, whatever business you're in, even the service business is evolving very, very, very rapidly. And we've got to watch the turnover of employees. We've really got to watch the skills of the people that are actually making things work. And added to this is the pressure from stakeholders. Next. So now we're moving from Industry 3.0 to vision with world-class manufacturing. And even so, these fixed processes are too rigid. They're too fixed. They're progressive, they're long-term, but they're externally defined. And total productive maintenance, total quality maintenance, and the Toyota production system are inflexible. They're too rigid. They're not expandable, and they have mixed sources. Next. So now we've got the digitalization framework, and we've got Industry 4.0. And what we have now is we're leveraging technology, and we're going to be talking a lot about technology, to digitize processes and streamline operations. What have we got? We've got advanced analytics. We've got AI and machine learning. We've got digital twins. And what we have now is a holistic and digital approach. We've got best of breed. We've got agility. We've got AI and machine learning. We've got industrial transformation, and we have faster time to benefit. So all of a sudden, we're getting accumulating returns rather than diminishing or slowing returns. Next. So here's our journey. Go to manage your core business. And the mission, vision, and values, strategic objectives, those are likely well known to you. And we're going to talk a lot about mission and vision. And what stays fixed is the values of your company, the purpose of your company. All these other pieces are going to be influenced to change. And you have to have 360 awareness to be able to figure out what's happening. Next, Jacob. Well, we need to simplify. And we need to drive out defects from your business that inhibit, that present limitations and inhibit performance. It's in your business and your government organization. In your service, it doesn't matter really what type of business you are. We want to drive out those defects and make sure we've got smooth traceability through, end-to-end visibility, top to bottom visibility. And we want to create awareness. We want to educate your senior managers. Next, Jacob. Now, this is likely the biggest challenge, to abandon past ideas and practices and attitudes. We've got to let go. We've got to let go of the way we've been thinking. We've got to open our minds to innovation. And we've got to eliminate our external weakness or internal weaknesses and be conscious with 360 awareness of external threats. We're going to create a digitalization framework and engage your senior managers. So I just want to look, when we look under simplify, we're educating your senior managers. Now we're engaging your senior managers, and words have power. What's really important here is when you're dealing with your senior managers to speak their language. And their language is the language of finance and how what you're proposing is going to impact the bottom line of your company in a very positive way. Develop your strategy. We'll going to be talking about that as well. And update your strategic objectives. They may not be up to date. And create an iterative plan. You got to know where you're going to be able to get to where you want to be. Next, Jacob. And here we architect to bridge the gap from where you are today to where the vision of where your C-suite has for the future of your company. So you've got to create those or convert those breakthrough ideas into competitive advantage and greater profitability. So we need context here. And we need to know what's variable and what's constant. Next, Jacob. So we've been doing what we've always done because it's been good enough. It's worked in the past. Do I have to really change? Well, I want to survive. So if I don't change, there's that red line here. Time is passing. And if I'm stuck and I'm not on the train, which is already in motion, I may never be able to catch up. I may never have the funds to catch up, and I may not have the time to catch up. So there's really a choice here in terms of educating yourself and getting on that train and learning what you need to know. And we're going to give you some tips today. So we're headed towards transformation. And with that, Jacob, I'm going to pass to you.
Thank you, Gail. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is actually driving this industry 4.0, how it's going to impact the way we operate our business, how it's going to impact people and culture, what's going to do to our organizations, and then it's going to dig into a little bit what sort of challenges we see, and obviously tie this up against the architecture as we have in that byline of the book.
Jacob, I'm just going to interrupt to say your video is not on.
Yeah, it's to make sure I don't interrupt the streaming of the audio. So some of the key technologies that is driving this industry 4.0, I've listed them up here, right? The first thing is that Internet of Things. It's the idea that all the devices, all the machines and products suddenly can pick up data. They can collect all that in real time, and they can actually implement some of the things that we come up with in the system as well. So it's going to dramatically impact how we look at machinery, equipment, and so on as well. Another aspect is big data. Big data is it's a little bit interesting because usually we would pick up data because we had a purpose. Now we suddenly start to pick up data, and we might not have a purpose yet, but picking up the data allows us to analyze it later on and see if there are things we missed. So it gives us a whole new way of being able to optimize our organizations and improve both productivity, but also decision making. Cloud computing is interesting because of the scalability, right? So suddenly it's not, we don't have to take that computing capabilities in as part of what we had as part of our scaling and our planning. AI, I mean, we've seen AI. I mean, everyone is talking about ChatGPT, but embedded into a lot of our systems today, there's the ability to actually put that idea of neural network and automate decisions. We can suddenly make predictions in a whole new way, and it's going to impact how our products look as well. Augmented reality is really one of those fascinating things. So we're seeing a lot of both augmented reality and virtual realities, just to make sure that we agree on the terms here. The augmented reality means that we apply a digital layer onto what we see, and it's going to have some massive impacts on the way we do training and how we actually collaborate and how people how we can bring information to people during their work. All of this technology we can automate through robotics and automation as well. So that is really what we see in terms of equipment taking advantage of all these technologies. And then, you know, we're used to to have to stock up on inventory to make sure that we can continue operations. But what we're seeing right now in terms of 3D printing is really interesting, right? You can get spare parts on demand instead of actually having them on stock. So all of these different technologies and ideas, really what we're seeing is going to do some big impacts. And some of the impacts that we're going to see in this is, well, we have all our factories, right? So the manufacturing, suddenly we have all the machinery and equipment in the factory talking to each other. It's going to optimize production. It's going to make maintenance a completely new deal as well. So there's some massive impacts on the different type of manufacturing we see. Was there a hand raised?
Sorry, Jacob. Yeah, Walter's got his hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah, I have my hand raised on the previous slide, and in particular about big data. So you mentioned something which I would like to take issue on, and that is storing data when you don't even know what the purpose of the data is going to be. Like, data storage is expensive. It is not free. And I have personally seen in Government of Canada whereby some people say, well, we need to store this data, and the when I ask them why is, well, we've got a data lake and we may need it in future sometime. And I'm going, well, why do you need it? And they go, I don't know. We're just going to need it someday. And my view is maybe not. In addition to that, big data is one thing, but then you have the duality of storing big data in a data lake, or in fact, storing it in the system of record and then merging the data afterwards. So which architecture is better, either big data lake or merging afterwards? And in addition to that, how do you know which data is worthy of storage and which isn't? Because you can't store 100% of all data, every transaction. That would be exceedingly expensive.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with you, but my point here is that we suddenly have the ability, and even though storing data is expensive, but the ability to discover things we didn't think of is one of the possibilities we have now that we didn't use to have because we can store more data. There's a cost to it, absolutely, and it's figuring out where, if you want to take that, if there's a potential for making money on that or not. I agree with everything. I'm just saying that it's actually new that we have the capability to store these amount of data. Whether it makes sense or not, that's a different topic. And I don't think I want to go into too many details on going through data and data architecture, and that's not really the point in this. It's just that this is one of the capabilities that are really driving and is different compared to what we have seen before.
Hey, thank you.
Great, thanks, Jacob.
The supply chain.
Before you move on, can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Is just on the data storage, I think it's industry dependent. So for instance, if I'm a smaller organization, I may have a policy in place of how long I'm going to keep data and what type of data I'm going to retain. But if I'm Health Canada and I have a patient record, I have to maintain that data until that patient dies, basically, or that individual. It might live 80 years, right? So I think it's industry dependent and policies have to be put around it. That's all. If I'm the CIA, I'm going to keep a lot of data for a lot of time, and we don't care how long, how much money it costs, because it ties into analytics. Eventually, somebody is going to want to analyze that data and look for trends, patterns, D&D. How many threats go at D&D every day? Somebody probing, trying to break in to the systems. Now, you're going to want that data, those streams coming in, so you can analyze who they are, where they are, and how to thwart them. So it's industry dependent.
Absolutely, but I mean, my only point here is just to talk about some of the technologies that are driving this, not necessarily how they're being applied and where it's relevant.
Yep,
but
I was just commenting on the previous comment from the other person.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, I mean, the idea of supply chain and figuring out how to optimize, I mean, it's, Uber is interesting, right? Uber was talking about being able to send a car to you before you actually ordered it. That's definitely because they stored some data and being able to analyze on that later on. But there are so many different opportunities that will definitely impact how we look at our supply chain and how we can optimize our supply chain. Healthcare is seeing an interesting change as well. Medical devices, we all have or a lot of us have smartwatches today that can pick up a lot of data. There's no reason why that shouldn't be connected to different type of healthcare services in the future. So the devices and the way we deliver all these different healthcare options and maybe even preventive healthcare it's a big area as well. The energy sector, right? The ability to do smart grids. We even heard talks about the possibility of having electric cars putting power back into the grid when you have the peak use of electricity. So there's a lot of different things that we can do with the electric grids and those IoT devices that are popping up in here. Transportation, we're seeing that today with autonomous vehicles and how that can, probably make things safer, but there's also that, kind of reduce congestion and a lot of different things that can save the environment as well. Big data in agriculture, right? So how do we actually optimize the way we yield our crops? There's a lot of new things. Education, that's really interesting, right? So can we deliver training in new ways? Can they even be personalized? So there's a lot of technology in this, and we see that in governments around the world also really being creative in terms of how can we deliver public services, right? And especially transparency, I think, is the high focus right now in a lot of governments because it, people seem to accept things better when they understand why they're looking the way they are. And all of this is going to impact the way we work. right? It's that when we introduce all these new technologies in our workplace, it's going to radically impact the type of skills that we are going to need from our workforce. It's probably going to change the nature of work in terms of what we know today. The consumer behavior, we're seeing that really changing right now, and that expectation of whenever you use a service or that everything is available and you don't have to manually correlate things. It's being provided as part of that service as well. So there's a lot of impact in terms of consumer behavior. Social interactions, right? So if we add this layer on top of everything we do, well, we have the technical aspect of this. So, the augmented reality, and we can meet in a virtual environment, but will impact our social norms as well, right? And we can see that slowly evolving. It's what you can and cannot do when you're online, what you can and cannot say. So there's a lot of things that'll impact the way we will do regular social interaction with each other. And all this also tie into the values that we see. I mean, there's this thing about everything becoming available instantly. The instant it happens, it means that people are not processing information before it's being shared. It's being sent directly into to everyone's access through different services, and that has generated a new approach to values and attitudes toward each other. And again, it will impact the way we live and interpret the way we interact around each other as well. So there's a lot of things that's going to impact the people and how we see the culture. And the interesting thing with everything that I've been talking about so far is that this is in motion, right? It's not a new state. The new state that we're looking at is change. We cannot really lock anything down anymore, because suddenly it's just creative people sitting in a basement somewhere and figuring out how to combine some of these things to provide a new product. So this idea that we could slowly figuring out how to adapt new technologies and use them in our organizations, that's not going to be the way we can operate anymore. It's going to change too fast. But the requirement towards our organizations are still the same, right? We want these robust, reliable organizations that are resilient against all these different things, so we can survive all these changes and these novel ideas. But there's some new things going on. I already talked about that ability to continuously adapt to all these different changes that are being thrown at us. And I put ethical in here, and I'm not claiming that ethical really is a new thing, but it's being put out in the open in a completely different way. And it goes a little bit back to what I just talked about when we talked about people and culture. It's when everything is publicly available instantly, that means we have to have a completely different approach to what does it mean to be ethical, because we are using new technologies and new ways of operating very, very quick. It doesn't have the same time to mature anymore. So that ethical view is suddenly a completely different level in terms of where you need to have focus. So some of those key challenges that we see for our organizations is that the ability to adapt to all these new technologies. So that has a lot to do with the structure and and our openness toward these technologies that are coming in, and we need to do to be able to do this to remain competitive. The integrations of systems in our organizations is becoming even more important here, because if our systems don't talk to each other, there's no way we will be able to keep up. So it's going to be a key success factor in our future. Cybersecurity is just a nightmare. I mean, we see that everywhere, and especially with that introduction of Internet of Things, suddenly anything can be hacked, and you know the severities of this will be of course vary, but it's going to be one of those really big and tricky things that that we need to cope with. The ability to manage change in the organizations is going to be it's going to be challenging, right? Because it's not just change the way we have seen where until now, where it's, you know, how do we deal with change management, right? But it's change happening all the time. It's a completely new way of looking at how we are dealing with the dynamic aspect of the organization. The regulatory aspect of this is interesting, because our governments are in catch-up mode, right? They are not able to keep up with in terms of regulations when it comes to how all these new ideas and principles get applied. And that ties a little bit back to my point on ethics again. We will suddenly be able to produce and deliver services in areas or ways that haven't really been seen before. So having that ethical view on things to make sure that we kind of know that we will be in the right space when the regulatory aspects start to catch up. That's going to be challenging, combined with the fact that what we're seeing in terms of regulations that are coming out now, it's insane. I mean, the amount of new standards and requirements that are coming out, and being able to manage all this in an environment that is continuously changing, that's going to be really interesting. And then we have the ability to collaborate with external stakeholders, whether it's partnering or in our supply chain. We have to get those much closer, because we don't have time to have these manual procedures in everywhere. And having full control of this, it's going to be tricky. And it ties a little bit back to some of the regulatory stuff that I talked about before, because when we look at what is coming out of the EU right now in terms of social responsibility. Social responsibility is not just for your organization, it's for your entire supply chain. And you can be held accountable to that. So there are new aspects that are not necessarily only technological here. They can be regulatory required as well. So it's a big undertaking to make sure that we take care of all this. Now, here's some of the good news in all this. We, in this group here, I mean, most of you in this group, I think, are working with enterprise architecture. And we are already on this path, right? Because we are used to building models of what it is we're doing. And one of the strengths of building all these models is the ability to break down the complexity and make it easier to actually make decisions in the organization. So the 7th bullet here, collaboration and knowledge sharing, is one of those key things that you need to remember. The models you're building is not just for other architects and engineers to understand. They are also for whoever is making decisions to understand as well. And that's a dimension that becomes really important in all of this. That's a communication aspect of all these models. And then I highlighted the business ecosystem here, and that is it's getting even more it's getting more complex, but it's also becoming more important. And that's really the context of your organization, whether that is technologies, trends, consumer behavior in terms of customer journeys, all these things that exist around our organizations that impacts why we are operating the way we are. And the trick here for us is to remember and figuring out what assumptions have we made when we implement all this, right? There might be an assumption that everyone knows how to use a phone. There might be assumptions that everyone has I don't know, electricity, whatever it might be. There might be some of these basic assumptions that we are making that doesn't necessarily hold up in the future. And the question is, and the challenge for us is to make sure that we have all those assumptions somehow within our scope. And the idea here is, if we have the surrounding world kind of modeled out in terms of how it impacts us, we can also have people who go out and continuously verify if this is still the case. If suddenly consumers are behaving differently, we need to know that. Our marketing people have always been working like this in terms of the product and services we deliver. Now we have to apply the same kind of thinking to our suppliers, to our technologies, and make sure that we catch these in good time. Right? There's so much uncertainty in all this, and that can be scary, and this is where the architecture can give us a way to break down this complexity and make sure that we can scope whatever it needs to be that needs to be addressed, and help the different decision makers in the organization actually make decisions that are relevant for their part of the business. Now there's a little bit of a I don't know if we call it recommendation here. Everything cannot change all the time. I mean, we know that is not possible, but our organizations still have to be able to change in a pace that we haven't really seen before. Gartner Research talked about bimodal software at some point, and then they lifted it up to the bimodal organization. And the idea is that if we can have some sort of base defined in an organization that facilitates the rest of the organization to be much better at adapting to new changes and to new requirements, then we can get a much more agile type of organization. So in IT, we have been thinking like this for a long time, because we built IT platforms that we could easily build something very dynamic on top of and continuously change to whatever requirements that came out of the organization. Now we have to think the same way into how we build our organization structures, and that's going to be a tricky thing. There was I think in the 90s, a term called the ambidextrous organization, and that really talks about how we balance that incremental and disruptive information, and what they've defined in there is that balance between when we exploit the technologies we have and when we explore new technologies. And I think it can all become very complex, but I think the key message here is that there needs to be set time off to learn. Because if you don't have that time to learn and discover new things, then you're going to be continuously operating as you always have, and the world is going to go in a different direction. And that's one of the scary aspects here that we need to that we need to build into the way we think. I don't think there's any doubt that the kids that are being born today, change is going to be a natural way, I think, in their lives. But for the next 50 years, we have to deal with people who are not used to change in this pace, right? So we have to figure out a way to set this up in our organizations. And I think this is an important thing that you guys can help talk to your organizations about. How do we build that learning aspect and that agility into our organization and the way the organization deliver the products or services to the outside? Just at the end here, I just have a little warning when you start to dig into this. There's some, I don't know if you heard it referred to as Google logic, right? Remember when you use Google to look for solutions to problems and opinions, Google tends to be an echo chamber, right? So if something is the common opinion, that's probably what you're going to find when you search in Google. And the problem is that we just kind of define that change is what's going to be the only constant here. So taking to the extreme, that means that everything we will find in Google is old news, right? And we see the same problem with AI, right? So when we train a neural network, we train your neural network on data. Data is inherently history. It already happened. So using the past to predict the future, that can be a little dangerous, right? So figuring out how do we deal with this, and just remember that there's something called cognitive bias, and we all suffer from this. And it's a little bit interesting, even when we think, we have a good idea, we want to be critical of that, so we'll start to do some research. The human nature means that you do a lot of research to confirm what you believe and not to actually go out and be open to new ideas. It's very, very human, but it's going to be something that we need to work a little harder on when we move forward with all these. So that was kind of my 2 cents on the impact of Industry 4.0. I'll pass the mic back to Gail.
Thanks, Jacob. Good job. This is whoops, what happened?
All right, it is.
Back up. Back up to the previous slide. Yeah, very good. At the bottom of the slide, we have a quote from the former CEO of Siemens Digital Factory. And he really understood the disruptive nature of digitalization. And he also understood that those organizations that would stay competitive and who understand its power will leverage its opportunities and become true digital enterprises. It's really an indication of how Industry 4.0 will change the way industry operates and the way people work. And Jacob's talked a lot about change and how that's really the only constant, sorry, not the only concept, sorry. And digitalization is in Industry 4.0, it's all about change. And we know that people fear change because they don't know what's on the other side of it. And that's our responsibility as business leaders, to make them comfortable and show them what's in it for them. Next slide. Now, Walter, you had a lot of comments about data, and the following fellow, was it Dave, talked about data as well. What if we're drowning in data? We're drowning in data. And particularly, you know, all that sensor information, that raw sensor information, it's falling on us like an avalanche. Now, Jacob's also talked about this, data silos, spreadsheets, our enemy, legacy siloed applications. And that's forcing people in organizations to duplicate work. What we really need is turning those silos into integrated systems so we can actually share data. That's really important, and integrate that data. So what's important? IT, information technology, OT, operational technology, ET, engineering technology, and CT, customer technology, because we're extending, you know, we're looking inside out and we're looking at it outside in. Who's in charge of the data? This is probably the hottest political area that I've run into. We need a data steward across the organization as that data flows through our organization end to end. And who's making those mission critical business decisions? How do we convert data to meaningful information? That's a big question. And it's going to be different for every organization. And our goal is really to connect strategy and execution. And how does execution impact strategy? We need traceability, we need visibility for business leaders and people in our organization to make meaningful business decisions. Next slide, Jacob. So what do most, it's not only asset intensive organizations, what do most organizations look like today? You could be a service organization, it could be government. You've got silos. Legacy applications, spreadsheets, duplication, databases. You've got effort to make that information. You might be getting lemons in to what you have to do, and you have to produce lemonade. Wait a minute. Whoa. Okay, thanks. We've got poor reporting as a result, and we have lack of visibility, and we've got a mismatch of people skills to what's required in the organization with all of this change that is in motion. And the only constant is change. And what we have here, what architectures are we talking about? If you look under the business architecture, we've got mission, vision, and purpose. What we know is the purpose of our organization is going to, and the values are going to stay the same. Our mission and vision may have to change with the changing times. And we have to have that 360 awareness to understand what's happening and how we respond. Because we know that everything is connected to everything else. Next slide. Here's the end game. We're talking, I think Jacob may have mentioned digital twin. What we've got here is we've got a position for innovation and agility. So if we have the digital twin of the organization, that's a concept and a term that was coined by Gartner, the DTO. And you've got the digital twin of your production process, whether, you know, whatever kind of organization you've got, you're producing something. Now, if we normalize and update legacy IT, operational technology, and engineering technology platforms, integrate that data and simulate the production process, we've got the digital twin of a production process. Now, think about this, twinning the digital twins. That is power. You've got visibility, you've got traceability, you've got line of sight, and you've got strategy connected to execution. And you're going to use enterprise architecture to transform your organization. Jacob, do you have some comments here?
I mean, it ties a little bit into what I talked about in terms of your assumption and that ecosystem thinking. I mean, the idea of having a digital version of your organization, being able to use that to make decisions, right? It's basically an advanced way of simulating your organization. But it's a little bit like a GPS in a car, right? If it doesn't get updated, it's just going to be another way to crash the car. So it's really, really important to have those assumptions and those contexts around these digital twins. And that goes for really any sort of simulation you do in your organization. But it becomes, we're adding some complexity in here. So it's extremely powerful. Just be aware of these if you decide to dig into the digital twin of the organization.
Just want to jump in for a second as well. Louise has a question asking if you could explain what you mean by digital twins. And yeah, if you could answer that question as well, Jacob, thanks.
Actually, Cecile, my question really was, what's twinning a digital twin?
So sorry. Yes, that's exactly what you wrote. That's not what I said. Yes, apologies. What do you mean by twinning digital twins? Thanks, Louise.
Gail, you want to take this?
Absolutely, yes. So Louise, twinning the twins. We've got the digital twin of the organization. We've got the digital twin of your operation. If we start exchanging data back and forth between those two digital twins, you'll have power that no other organization likely will have. It's an incredibly powerful concept and an incredibly powerful tool to be able to imagine what's going on in your organization. Not to imagine it, but to get your hands on it and really understand where the bottlenecks are and where the improvements can happen. Does that help?
Thanks, Gail. And so when you say a digital twin of the organization being different to the digital twin of your operations, are you referring to your enterprise architecture as being the digital twin of your organization?
Absolute. Yes. Walter, do you have a question?
I actually have a comment, and my comment has to do with information silos and how to actually implement the twinning of the digital twins. And my comment is based on Conway's law, which says the information architecture and the software architecture reflects the organizational architecture, not the other way around. So if you have an organizational architecture that says this organization is attached with finance and this other organization supports the HR function, and these are two separate organizations, and then you try to put in a system which combines those two information databases or those two applications. If you keep the organization separate, you will have a very difficult time merging the data, merging the application. And in fact, what you need to do is you need to merge the organizations before merging the data and the applications. So the organizational structure defines what the application and data structure is. So therefore, before you change the application and the data structure, you must change the organization structure. Now, many people find this ridiculous because they're saying, well, we're merging the organization structure that supports these applications and this data when in fact there's no relation to this application or organization, this applications or this data. But if the goal of the organization is to eventually merge this data, then you have to merge the organizational structure first. Otherwise, the organizations put up barriers to the merger. That's my comment. Thank you.
I
Great.
just,
Thank you.
sorry, Roger, I'll get to you in a second here. Walter, I assume that when you talk about organization, you're talking about departments. Is that correct?
I'm talking about departments and sub-departments and DG levels and director
Yeah.
levels and all of this, the organization of the enterprise. And if you have two silos within the organizations, you better expect to have siloed applications, siloed data.
Of course. And what we're talking about here is the velocity of change. When you talk about siloed applications, legacy systems are our enemy. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to upgrade legacy systems. You probably have.
Many.
But it's a nightmare. And we're talking, and what we're really giving today is a vista of the speed of change, the need for all, and Jacob did talk about this. You can't handle everything at once. You've got to prioritize what's important. And you also have to have that 360 view of what's going on outside the organization so that you can shift and move and with those particular changes. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that's mandatory. Roger?
Yeah.
And I have to jump in and, sorry, Roger has his hand up and I have to jump in and do a little time check as well, Gail.
Yeah,
We're
I'll
almost
just-
finished.
we're almost-
We're almost
I'm
finished.
going to be super fast on this one. So first of all, I disagree with this organizational discussion completely, because whatever we do with regard to making this 4.0 work has to be completely organizationally agnostic, and it should work regardless of your organizational structure. The data is the data. Cross-functional is what it's all about. Value creation at the end of a value stream or a value chain is what it's all about. You should be able to reorganize 25 times and have this still work. That's my only comment.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. Jacob, on to you.
This is about getting your processes and your people aligned, right? Again, there's a big technology aspect to this, but it's the assets of the people of the organization really here is really the people and the way we get them engaged in this. If we don't get our people engaged, we're not going to succeed here. So this is all about engagement and empowering people to make the decisions relevant to actually get on track. So I don't want to talk too much about this because we're getting at the end of this. So, but yeah, we need to get people engaged. And back to you, Gail.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to say here is that, and you've just talked about this, Jacob, to be informed. We've talked about this all the way along. And using our mission here today was to give you some suggestions and a bit of advice in terms of how we see the world and educate your executives and your peers. and take action. That's really the mission of our book, is to encourage and to inspire people to take action, develop the big picture, take the small steps, and leverage your success. Being aware that change is the only constant. An enterprise architecture is never static. And if it remains static, everything's going to become outdated, and you'll spend more and more effort on managing unproductive architectural gaps. Jacob?
Yeah, I think the scary part of this in terms of what we're used to is that there are so many different things changing at the same time. And so figuring out what is it that is always the constant, which hopefully is the value and what our purpose is in terms of the organization. And then, if you're going to survive in this, and this is more of a personal thing, we'll have to embrace that change and learning new stuff. Because if you want to be able to continue to operate the way you have done until now, you're going to be left behind. So figuring out how you can actually embrace and enjoy learning new stuff and finding new ways of working, I think is the way through this process. And yeah, that's my final words on this, I think.
Excellent. So, questions and questions. We love questions.
Walter.
Sorry, that was a finger slip.
Okay.
Hope you aren't giving us the finger. Sorry, couldn't resist.
I would never do that.
No, I know you wouldn't. I know you wouldn't. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. Final opportunities to ask questions of Gail and Jacob before we thank them.
Cecile, do you have any closing remarks, being the top representative from CloseReach today?
Oh boy, wow, that's putting me right on the spot. Thanks. That's great. No, we were very pleased to have you join us today, Gail and Jacob. Very interesting topic. Did you have a slide to plug your book?
Well, we opened with our book and we ended with the picture of our book. It's available from MRO Bookstore, which is our publisher. Great. And we were pleased to launch our book at the International Maintenance Conference in Florida in December in Marco Island. And Jacob was generous enough and good enough to be able to fly in from Copenhagen for our signing event, which was very exciting.
Great, wonderful. Thank you both. If you want to put the website in the chat for folks, if they're interested in learning more about where to get the book, that would be great. Gail, if you could send me or Jacob, if you could send me the slides as well when you're done, when we're doing the video, it's always helpful. And the video will be put up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks. So if anybody wants to go back and review, that's where you'll be able to find it. So thanks very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, I would like to take a moment now. We're going to shift gears slightly and move on to JayR from ESTC.
Slightly switching gears? Oh my God, this is a huge switch of gears.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
just
yeah.
Slight gear. Just a slight gear switch.
Slight gear. Okay.
Anyway, JayR is here from ESTC to share some fun technical things with us. Yeah. I'm going to.
You seeing my screen?
I am.
All right. I kind of use accident as a dummy template kind of thing. So this could apply to any type of template. Has to do a little bit with governance and a little bit with it's more languages than anything. The English, French, bit of a dilemma that I seem to come across every once in a while. So just I'm working in English right now. And if I create some content, hi there, and just put in English and my consequence is English, and I view this, hi there. I've got a very simple governance that we're going to do, and I'm going to use governance to create a language variant. So right now, that template is only created in English. Create a language variant. Oh, yeah, it's not a comment I normally would hear.
We seem to have a new guest speaker. Love it. Love it.
Awesome.
That's great. I think I'm
We have
just
video
going
of this? I should turn my video on.
to...
No,
I don't think that there's video. I'm going to
No
put
video.
that person on mute.
All right. So now we can see I did a language variant. My object ID is the same for both English and French, but my revision has changed. I'm working in English right now. If I want to change this to be French, technically, I have just changed the English variant, not the French variant. And if I close this and reopen it, you'll see my English word has now been flipped. I am working in English and I just typed in French, like it's backwards. So if I want to edit in English, let me spell this properly. And just reload this. So the idea here is if I want to translate on the fly, if I knew both languages, I would want to look at the object, look at the language that of English and translate it in French. This because there was no French, it took what was already in English and made that the French. If I now flipped this to French and edit this, I now can edit the French variant, and I'll do all uppercase just so here, but realize that, oh, I made a mistake. This really should be English. Remember, my language is in French right now, so this is this is really gonna mess things up because I've saved it here, but this was my last change, so it's gonna get messed up. I'm showing you some of the downsides to this, but it will work where we can see both English and French at the same time. So if I, again, working in French, if I make this French and oops, cancel, and I save it and then flip this back to English, I then can work in both languages. Oops, sorry. What I find troublesome here is the field that I shouldn't modify, I'm able to modify. So I really want this one to be English and not touch this stuff. So I created a query that lets me look at both, but only edit in the language that I'm in. So right now I'm in English. This is the French field that I can't change, but I can now change the English field if I could spell. And if I just put a 2 on this, just so you could see. And then when I flip this to French, I will only be able to see or modify the French content. So this is allowing me read the English, copy the English if you want, but only change the French fields. Looks like I have case sensitive on here. French 2. And I could copy this if it makes sense to do so. Oops. French. This was a little bit to set up. I see we have a little bit of time. I won't take that much time. I'll just give you a rough outline of what I did. In a query design, I'm using 10.8 right now. But when you build your query, under query options, in the generic query, under query options is a default revisions and language. Normally it's just default revision. You can flip it to a language variant. That, when I run this now, is going to show me both the English and French for one field. Let me just do a preview. Uh-oh. Oh, wrong screen. So we can see here, same field, I'm looking at the English and the French. What I then do is I do some composites, and I will take the French, put a filter on it to say, just show me the French stuff. I'll do an English one that is just show me the English ones. Then I will take the English and the French, and I will, put them into the same diagram. So really what I'm doing is I'm taking the English, this is only English stuff, this is only French stuff, join them together to then show me, it's originally what I had before with the English and French, but now I'm using default revisions, but now I'm going to see this all in one row. From there, create two spreadsheets. Where's my diagram? So you take this guy, copy it into the English diagram, merge them together, and then have two spreadsheets pointing to the same data. And the French spreadsheet is filtered, where am I looking? Right here. So my French fields are for an English are read only. So read only for this guy. And then my French one is just the opposite. Then in the dashboard here, this dashboard item has the two languages, the language variant on it. So the English variant of this points to the English spreadsheet. And then when I flip this to the French language, French variant comes up, it points to the French spreadsheet. So I now can look at and do a read only. I think the only other thing that was a little gotcha on this was the creating of a French language variant, because I wanted that to happen automatically. It doesn't have to be a list because the list is only pointing to a create language variant. That's an out of the box governance action method. And there's really no properties in here. It's just make it happen and it flips it. 10 minutes to spare, Gail. That's it.
That's it? You're done?
That's it. Simple, easy.
Questions for JayR? Somebody just applauded.
It might have gone a little too fast, but that if you have the need, reach out to me and I can document and we can talk about it a bit more. because it gets a little complicated with, it's a composite of a composite. So it's my generic query design that goes to composites for English and French, and then a composite again off of these guys, and merge them together. And then now I have one spreadsheet or two spreadsheets.
Okay.
I don't know if that will be of help for other departments. I haven't used it yet. I just figured it out with that generic query, and we'll see what happens. Cecile, that's it.
Right. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
sir. Appreciate it.
Okay.
As I switch back over to my screen, if anybody's got any questions for JayR, please feel free to jump in. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for your attention today. Thanks to our presenters, Jacob Lund and Gail Petersen, and to JayR from ESTC. Our next meeting will be at the end of March. Last Monday of March. We'll be at springtime at that point. That's exciting. It will be March the 25th. And the agenda so far, we're still working on the entire agenda, but it will be a more technically focused meeting. So we might actually get JayR to come back and show us something else. But we'll also have our CloseReach staff and our CloseReach folks talking about the findings about the Archimate dashboards, what we've learned to date, and a little bit more about what we've learned about the QualiAI tool that came out in 10.9 and other features and functionality within 10.9 that we're exploring. So that will be the focus of the next meeting. So we hope you can join us. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything before we wrap things up for today? Okay. Thanks very much for your attention, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel in, oh, somebody's said something. I just noticed the chat. Oh, thanks, Francois. Appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to join us. The YouTube channel will have the QualiWare user group meeting up within a week or so, and then we'll also have a copy of Gail's slides. And she put in the chat, you'll see the link to where her book is available for purchase. So thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.